Hello, and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I'm your host, Elysius Inger.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody today? How are you, Lacey?
Excellent. So I hear we have a great show in store today. Anything interesting happening in the news we want to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to talk about some news, and then we're going to talk about divorce. It's what a wonderful thing it is.
Sounds fun.
Yep, but first we got to start with Tucker Carlson, the number one news host, even though the show's not a news show. He had that primetime slot. Out of nowhere, Fox fired him. Just shit-canned him. And in fact, he did a Friday. It was last Friday. Whenever you're watching this in the future, it was last Friday for us. But it was his last episode. He got fired on like Saturday or Sunday and wasn't even allowed to do a finale episode or a farewell episode. So his last episode ended on him doing an advertisement on a show about eating bugs and him saying, "Well, see you on Monday." That's how he ended his last broadcast on Fox. So there's all this speculation about what he's going to do, but he's seen the top of the mountain. He's not going. He's going nowhere but down from here. I mean, but why did they fire him? That was big speculation. Was it because they just lost this lawsuit with Dominion, or settled it, for $787.5 million, right, that they have to pay? Part of that was, there was a lot of evidence that they knew that the whole big lie about the election being rigged in 2020, they knew all that shit was false, but they put it on the air anyway. And they had a lot of messages from Tucker Carlson that blew up, and him talking shit about the other hosts. And so that was part of it. But another part of it was he's actually being sued by one of his producers for kind of a sexual harassment, volatile workplace kind of thing. And so that was coming through at the same time. So I think Fox just said, you know what? Fuck him. Let's fire him. And it'll send a message. Because if we could fire our top guy, right, then what does that say to everybody else? You're all on the chopping block too. And people are like, it's going to hurt Fox. I'm like, not really. They've done this before. They did this with Bill O'Reilly. They did this with Glenn Beck. They've done this over and over and over again. But yet, they have no problem with it. But we'll see a little bit about what the cause was. This is the Wall Street Journal talking about it.
Ahead of Fox's defamation trial against Dominion voting systems, people familiar with the matter say Fox News lawyers presented Carlson with what they thought was good news. They told him the court would redact from a legal filing the time he called a senior Fox News executive the C word. But Carlson wasn't impressed. He told his colleagues he wanted the world to know what he said about the executive.
Internal messages, many of which were from Tucker Carlson to other colleagues, were made public in the discovery process, and some of those ended up being redacted, but in them, Mr. Carlson made disparaging remarks about some of his colleagues and other people at the network.
The court filings also revealed an exchange where Carlson called for the firing of a Fox News reporter for fact-checking Donald Trump's false claims about the 2020 election. "Please get her fired," Carlson wrote. "It's measurably hurting the company." In another message, Carlson is shown complaining about the network's news coverage, including its decision to call Arizona for Joe Biden on election night. According to one document, he wrote, "We devote our lives to building an audience, and they let Chris Wallace and Leland Vittert wreck it," and included an obscenity. In the messages...
So this just shows you what a real newsman he is. When they tell the truth and it harms Fox, he gets upset. But his show's not a news show. It's not classified as news, so he can say whatever he wants. He doesn't have to be checked. But his whole thing is he's cultivated this audience, and that's what Fox's whole thing is. They've cultivated this audience where you don't tell them the truth. You tell them what they want to hear. And they don't want to hear that Trump lost. So what do? We just say Trump won. We just keep doing that over and over and over again. They don't want to hear facts. They just want to stay in their bubble. And that's what Fox is. But it's starting to crumble now. Because now they're getting sued left and right. just how that happened.
I mean, I want to hear what I want to hear as well. However, if that's not what's actually going on in the world, then it doesn't make sense to be telling me something that's simply not what's happening.
No, but that's the problem. I mean, that's the thing, is they just want to hear what they want to hear. It's not about reality. Like we did the video, we did the Bud Light video last week about Dylan Mulvaney and her little ad, right? It's a transgender woman, and all the hate shit that we got for the comments was all, it's not a she, and da-da-da-da-da, and they're mentally ill, and you guys are sad. And it's like, yeah, I mean, technically she's a she. I mean, it's not me speaking, that's the American Psychiatric Association. Right? That's not me talking. I mean, I'm just going to go with them.
Get their genders changed on people get their genders changed on their driver's license at certain points, so that becomes literally the law says.
The driver's license thing too is a great example, because it's like you can pretty much make up whatever you want on your driver's license. I mean, they don't. I mean, they ask you your weight. They don't make you get on a scale or weigh you like a prized hog or something. I mean, So
right.
Anyway, that's all ridiculous stuff. But so moving on with the Fox News thing. So the Fox News had to pay the $787.5 million settlement. Now they're also getting sued by Smartmatic, I think is what it's called, and they want like $2.6 trillion. So that they're going to have to settle with them, because once you settle that first one, you're pretty much stuck settling the rest of them. And Fox is desperate because they're going to have to settle all these, because if the actual information gets out into court and gets broadcast on the news, it's going to be a pretty big death nail for them. So they're trying to keep this whole thing quiet. But there is an upside thanks to the Trump tax cuts and the Bush tax cuts. And here's the upside. And this is Kyle Kalinske, and he's going to tell you what the upside is for Fox.
Here from David Sirota and The Lever. Listen to this, guys. Fox News says it can claim a tax write-off for its defamation settlement with Dominion. The deduction would lower the company's tax rate, effectively forcing taxpayers to provide up to a $200 million subsidy to the company for its election lies.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
So they can deduct all $787.5 million of the lawsuit, which means they don't have to pay tax on any of that money. So they get a $200 million deduction.
That's a hell of a write-off, my God.
But that's my point, is that it's like the conservatives always bitch about, well, food stamps or this or that, and how are we going to pay for it, and what's it going to cost the taxpayers, and we're going to do student loan forgiveness, and what's that going to cost the taxpayers, and healthcare, what's that going to... But Fox gets $200 million in tax write-offs. Nobody says shit. You don't hear a goddamn thing out of those people. It just kills me. I didn't have much else about that story. I just thought that was great, because it's like we hear that all the time, and it's like, what do you, tax cuts for the rich? Nothing. Right?
Right.
We want to put more money into public school. Well, where are we going to get the money? What's it going to cost the taxpayers?
Right.
Why should I be paying taxes for some kid to go to school in New York when I live in Kansas? Right? Billionaires get to write off their yachts? Nothing.
Like, that's fine.
Fine.
Okay.
Totally fine. Free lunches at schools? I don't want to pay that.
I don't want to pay for kids to eat.
No. No. But for, Betsy DeVos to get another yacht. Don't have a problem with that. Okay. Well, speaking of crazy stuff too, so I'm sure you heard about the deal with Mifeprex. with the judge. So mifepristone,
Oh, geez.
yeah, it's I think it's an abortion pill, and it's a really common one. It's used for a lot of medical, chemical abortion, right? But it's especially like miscarriages. So instead of the woman naturally miscarrying, you give her the abortifacient, and it's safer, right? Right, instead of her having to go through that long, painful process. So for miscarriages, just general abortion, you know, within a certain time frame. Well, it's been around since the 70s, but a judge in Texas felt that when the FDA approved it in the 70s, they didn't do the proper vetting, even though they did. And even though the pill's been used for 40 plus years, right, almost 50 years, and the pill is mifepristone has a lower death rate than people taking Tylenol. The judge said, no, you can no longer allow this pill anywhere in the country. Right? And we're going to look at a little bit of this because this is just an insane thing. So now it's the Supreme Court sort of put a stay on that, and they're going to be looking at it. But this is a medical pill that, literally tens and not hundreds of millions of, probably hundreds of thousands of women at least take every year for things like miscarriages, general abortions. It's incredibly safe. And now this judge wants to ban it, this federal judge.
Hot button issue of abortion access.
I have confidence in our judiciary and the way to play out.
The hard right anti-choice MAGA wing in this country will keep working and working and working to take away all women's rights.
But for now, the most commonly used abortion pill remains widely available for millions of women after the Supreme Court preserved full access to mifepristone Friday, while the appeals process plays out over a Texas judge's ruling that would have jeopardized access to the drug. A majority of the justices granting the Biden administration's request for temporary relief, with Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito publicly dissenting. The case now goes back to the Fifth Circuit, where oral arguments are set for May 17th. Nothing about the medication's availability will change before then, and may not until the matter goes back to the High Court.
I think it's very highly unlikely, given that we're in April already, that this case would be heard and resolved this term. That would be extraordinary. Much more likely, they're going to set the matter for argument in the fall of 2023, and a ruling would come out in the spring of 2024.
The White House relieved for now, with President Biden arguing the lower court decision would have, quote, undermined FDA's medical judgment and put women's health at risk. A new NBC News poll shows 58% of adults say abortion should be legal either always or most of the time, compared to a combined 38% who believe abortion should be illegal, either with exceptions or without exceptions. The abortion debate proving to be a key issue for voters as the race for 2024 heats up.
Morning, God joins me now from the...
So anyway, it's become sort of a political thing when really it's a health and financial thing for the most part for women. They're making it an ethical question. When really it's a necessity question. These kinds of drugs, that's what they're for. So like they had a woman who recently who testified, and she was, I wish I'd found that video now that I'm thinking about it, where she testified and she was talking about how she had to went through basically what was a miscarriage kind of deal. And that she had to get to the point where she was close to almost dying before they could abort it. So that's all that extra medical cost, plus the damage to her body, plus she might not be able to have children again.
Well, if they really want to make this an issue of ethics or morality, why don't we go ahead and bite and make it an issue of ethics or morality? We can tie it in with what our last segment was about. Mm-hmm. I mean, they want to judge women that maybe don't want to bring in a child into the world. They want to abort. and they want to try to force women's hands and require them to have these children. And the same people that want to require them to have children also don't want to put any money into the resources that woman will require in order to raise that child and to take care of that child appropriately. I don't know. It seems really incredibly hypocritical if you're going to say that all of these pregnancies need to go to term and become human beings put into our society, then you probably need to back it with your money too and say you're willing to spend the money and the resources for all of these
for the care
pregnancies to become humans, to exist, to take care of them.
To care for these children.
They stop caring as soon as the child becomes a child and born.
Right.
They stop caring at that point, and then they say, you need to be able to take care of that. Well,
right.
Maybe they had decided early on they couldn't take care of a human being and didn't want to bring one into the world, Right.
Well, and the other thing too is just the general disdain for, okay, you're a woman, you're going through a miscarriage. Maybe you wanted it, maybe you didn't, but let's say you wanted it. That's a pretty horrible thing, just in and of itself. Pretty emotional thing. On top of that fact, now we're saying instead of you just taking the drug and we'll get this over with relatively painlessly and quickly and cheaply, no, now you have to suffer for months until you're in a position where you're almost dying for us to give you an exception to abort that, even though it's dead. I mean, there was another story I read about a woman wanted the child, found out later on the kid did not have a skull, didn't form. Happens. Was not allowed, the state she was in, not allowed to get an abortion. She had to give birth to a baby without a skull that died within like the hour. And that thing suffered probably immensely, and she suffered immensely. And it could have, once again, damaged her ability to have children in the future.
And not to mention allowing that pregnancy to happen and for a child to actually be born that suffered incredible pain only to die anyway.
Yeah. And just the trauma that caused. So, I mean, this is, once again, if the goal here were to reduce the number of abortions, that's easy. Planned Parenthood, better sex education. Make condoms more available, make contraception more available. Then people would get pregnant when they want to, as opposed to accidentally. Right? But they're against all that. They're against contraception and all that stuff. So what does it all come down to at the end? It's really about, we just want to control women. We don't want women to have access to these things where they can make decisions. That's what this whole thing is. And we'll get into some of this because we're going to talk about divorce here in a minute. That's part of that too. And the whole pushback from the right wing. But it's really about oppression of women at the theme of it. And honestly, the abortion stuff, who does it affect the most? Poor people. And going back to that, we'll do this last little bit on our continuing coverage of the debt ceiling crisis, as it were. So the Republican bill, their solution, right, to deal with the debt ceiling, we're going to make all these cuts, right? And we've got through this before. Kevin McCarthy, who's the Speaker of the House, is an idiot, but he had to make all these backwater deals just to become Speaker. So when they got to, well, what cuts should we make? It's like, well, we can't really cut the military. We can't really cut this or that, or blah, blah, blah. So what do? They went to the old sorting hat and they pulled out, let's cut food stamps. Let's cut benefits for college students. Student loan forgiveness. So here they are. Here's the Republicans. Here's, I forget who, this is Maria Bartiromo, her show. And this woman is Republican. And she's celebrating all the cuts we're going to make to poor people.
You'll find out when I get on the House floor. So it's a non-answer. But to the work requirements, I mean, we have 40 million Americans who are able-bodied with no dependents that are of working age that aren't working. Mm-hmm. So if you are going to be accepting benefits like SNAP and others, I think, or Medicaid, I think it's important that you are actively seeking a job, that you are in the workforce. And so this is something that people across the country have asked for, and we've delivered. And like I said, there's
Bosses.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And he was right. Bosses have asked for this. What she's missing is...
Well,
go ahead.
I think she's incredibly uninformed. I mean, there are people that do not have jobs that are using these resources, but quite frankly, I know a lot of people that are utilizing these resources that are employed.
Mm-hmm. Most are.
They literally just don't make enough money. They are employed, mm-hmm. but they do not earn enough money to be able to go without the supplementary resource.
Well, the thing that cracks me up about this is when you talk... Okay, so we've done this before. Roughly 211 million Americans are working right now, right? We've covered this out of the 330 million, right? So 120 million are children, or they're elderly, or they disabled, or whatever, right? Of the 40 million she's talking about, most of them are either in college, and they're not taking food stamps because they're in college, right? So that's part of it. And the other big chunk of that 40 million aren't working are mothers and fathers who are stay-at-home parents, and the other parent works full-time. Why? Because they can't afford daycare, because daycare is too freaking expensive. Even if you were working full-time, daycare would probably cost more than you would make.
Yes, there's a person in my life that would prefer to be working as opposed to being a stay-at-home parent, but has multiple children under school age. And she said, quite frankly, I can't find a daycare situation that wouldn't cost more than I actually can earn.
Right. That would be the thing. Is like if you had, say, 2 or 3 kids, and daycare's cheap daycare would probably be what, $800, $1,000 a month? Minimum. I mean, that would be cheap, but that's $3,000 a month. Right. I mean, that's a full-time gig for a lot of people. So I mean, once again, it's a whole stupid thing. Well, 40 million people aren't working, but also what she doesn't make the connection of those 40 million people, not all of them are on food stamps.
Right.
A lot of them are college students, or they retired early, or
right. Are we certain these are the same 40 million people? Like, are they the same people?
Right. How many people?
Not necessarily.
How many people on food stamps actually work part-time or more? Probably most of them.
Yeah, I know plenty. I know plenty of people that are on state insurance programs and have food stamps, and they are employed. Mm-hmm. They are not unemployed people,
Yeah. So once again, just celebrating, and they were like, "Yep," and this is what the people want. What people? Employers, because we want them desperate and coming to work for as cheap as possible, because they're so desperate for anything they can get. And then I guess their kids' daycare will be, their nanny will be Mrs. Padlock. You'll just lock them in a room.
Right.
Throw some food in there and go to work, because you don't have any other options. I mean,
right. Throw a sleeve of crackers in periodically.
Right. Well, because that's all you could afford. You're not getting food stamps.
Right. Exactly. Here's your tap water and the sleeve of crackers.
Oh man. So there it was. That's our news segment for the day. God. Oh, it gets worse and worse and worse. But we're gonna go into because we wanted to do this for a while, divorce finance. Right? So let's start with a joke. 2 guys walk into a bar. They go up to the bartender and they go, give us both, round of tequila shots, right? The bartender pours them. They slam down their tequila shots. They're like, give us another. And the bartender's like, okay. So he pours them another. They slam them down. They're like, give us another. And the bartender's like, whoa, guys, slow down. This is not a bachelor party. And one of the guys looks at the bartender and says, yeah, it is. Tommy here's getting divorced tomorrow.
That's funny. That's a different kind of bachelor party.
It is a bachelor party. So, yeah, there's the old, because my father used to, is a lawyer, and he used to do divorce law a long time ago. And I used to clerk for him when I was in college. And I remember doing a lot of divorces with him. And yeah, the main joke that you'd always hear from divorce lawyers is, why is divorce so expensive? Do you know why, Lacey?
Why?
Because it's worth it.
I mean, that feels correct.
No. For those of you who are in good marriages and good relationships, fantastic. Congratulations. We wish you all the best. But for those of you who've been in a bad relationship, you know, sometimes getting out of there is the best thing that can happen. So, part of what divorce finance is, and we'll go, I just want to look at this article a couple times real quick, but it's like regular finance. You know, person comes in, you try to figure out what their goals are and whatnot, except for now you've got more moving parts, right? Because now you got to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be sort of the nature of the divorce? What's going to be the custody situation if they're children, right? I mean, you're trying to gauge all this, and you're trying to figure, okay, and who's the higher earner? Is it your client or is it their spouse, right? I can tell you as a financial planner, you want to get the lower earning client because they're about to get a big swath of money, right?
Right.
Unless there's a real ironclad prenup or something in place. But yeah, so some of the things that you have to be careful of is like, okay, when they, what state are you in, right? What are the laws on that? So there are different things, and we can go over them, but I want to look at this real quick. So let's go to this. So here's actually a good website. It's just marital-laws.com. And so what it does is it breaks it down what the laws are by state. So it covers the various things you'll have to deal with: alimony, child support, custody, some of the divorce law, visitation, and property division. So let's just start with alimony to start with. So what is alimony? Alimony is spousal support. Spousal support. So let's say Lacey and I were married and getting divorced, and Lacey made a lot more money than I did, right? So what they do is they division it out, and they go, okay, well, Duncan's used to this standard of living kind of thing. So based on the state and how they break it down, they'd look at what Lacey makes, what I'd make, and Lacey would pay me some alimony every month, right? Now, during the divorce process, the alimony tends to be a little stepped up, so I'd get a little bit more. So for Lacey, she wants the divorce to end, the divorce to be finalized quicker, because then her alimony will go down, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. As where it might be in my interest to drag out the divorce for as long as possible, because Lacey's going to pay me a higher amount. Right. So these are things you got.
I already feel angry about this. Okay.
Right, but these are things you got to think about for both sides, right? It depends on which side you're on with your client. As a financial advisor, their lawyers thinking about this too. So, but you got to plan this, because if this thing drags out for a year, Lacey's going to have less money. If we can get it settled in 5 months and get everything signed and split, then you just saved her 7 months worth of inflated alimony. Now, alimony typically lasts 7 years, 5 to 7 years, depending on the state, unless I either die, right? And then you're off the hook.
We can only hope.
Yeah. And then Lacey will be the number one suspect.
Such a morbid joke. I'd be like,
yes, Lacey's gonna.
Duncan, eat the fried foods.
Lacey's gonna spend a lot of time in interrogation, and then maybe prison time, depends. And then the other thing is, if I get remarried, she's off the hook for alimony. So there's the what was that show? 2.5 Men. There was because one of the ongoing jokes of the show was the guy Alan. His ex-wife raked him for alimony, so he was paying some huge amount in alimony every month, which isn't realistic, but it's a TV show. But he gets to the point where he finds out she's engaged to this other guy who's a doctor, and his brothers ask him, "Well, how does that make you feel?" And he's like, "I don't know, man. She's the mother of my child. She's my first wife. I mean, I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now." And his brother's like, "Well, at least you're off the hook for alimony." And he's like, "That's right." And then he's all excited about them getting married.
He's like, "Yay, she's in love!"
Yay, yay. There's also a funny bit where when he goes to give her the last alimony check, his brother goes with him and brings a camera, right? So they can memorialize it. But instead of a regular check, they go to Kinko's and they get one of those giant game show checks printed out to give her.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like the right way to do it, honestly.
Well, if you've been getting raked for a long time, you might as well. But anyway, so that's what alimony is. It's a little different in each state, but you're going to have to face it. Now, child support we'll go through a little bit, but different states have different ways of doing this. So let me show you this. Let's see if this gives me a good sense of this. So child care deduction. Oh, this is just the deduction. Support, shared parental time offset. Let's see. Yeah, so they look at how much each parent has the child. If the one parent has the child more often based on the custody arrangement, then that'll be factored in the child support. So here's what I was looking for: joint custody. These are almost all the states except for New York allows joint custody, but some states kind of mandate it. So favorite joint custody. So a lot of these blue states, right, do not, but the green states do favor joint custody. So like Arizona, Nevada, California, Texas. I think joint custody is bad in general. And the reason is this, because when they break it down for joint custody, they're saying each parent gets the child 50% of the time, which means the kid is 1 week with this parent, 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 right? In those kind of states too, you can't leave the county if you're the parent. If you get a job somewhere else and need to move, you could be giving up custody of your children to take that job. So you were basically stuck.
So I kind of want to add in there. Now, I know a lot of people that have that situation, but I'm thinking particularly of one particular client of mine where she is the custodial parent, but even though she is the custodial parent, and the other parent typically takes, the kids on weekends, etc., that sort of thing.
Right.
She still is not allowed to move more than a certain mile radius from where the other parent is.
Right. And so that's a joint custody.
There's still a great restriction there, even though she's the person who has the kids the majority of the time.
Right.
She had an interest in pursuing a job opportunity in another state.
Right. A lot of states,
but couldn't get enough chains on her leash, so to speak, to allow her to go that far.
Right. So a lot of states will allow for what's called, it's a type of joint custody, but one of the parents has primary custody and the other has secondary. So that's more of the typical thing you see in most states, is where the one parent, the primary custody parent, has the child all the time for the most part, but the secondary custody parent gets weekends and like 1 week or 1 month out of the summer and every other holiday. Right. That's more of a regular sort of arrangement that you would see. But some of these joint states, they will force you to be in that situation where you're kind of both locked in. So I could have the kid primarily and move right? Take the kid with me, but we'd have to arrange something where that other parent still got ample visitation rights. But there would be an arrangement that could be made, but it depends on which state you're in. So those are always a big issue because that's also going to affect child support because if the child's with me 80% of the time, right? And Lacey's my ex, then Lacey's paying child support for the other 30%. She doesn't have the child. And they'll factor that in depending on the state, but it's also factored by how much Lacey makes, right? So if Lacey makes $35,000, her child support's probably not going to be a ton. But if Lacey makes $200,000 a year, her child support's going to be significant, a lot more significant, because it's going to be based on how much she makes. So just important stuff to factor in, and then there's different divorce laws. We'll get into that in a second because that's going to be interesting. And then visitation is the other issue, and then property division is there's a couple ways. So there's equitable property distribution. Basically, it's you're trying to do it in a what is a fair way, right? So it can be agreed upon by the spouses through a property settlement. Court can make a judicial decision on it. Sometimes there's an arbitration process you have to go through. But there's two types. There's community property laws, if you're from a community property state or a common law state. And community property basically means, so all the blue states here are no, the green states are community property. But these are also, I think, all common law marriage states too. So if you're with somebody for 3 years, let's say Lacey and I are dating and living together for 3 years, in those community property states, even though we're not married, by all consideration, we're married. So if we separate, the property is being split, right? And that's usually split 50-50. That's how they try to do that.
I wonder if you know this, is that all property that is held by any of these individuals or property that was acquired by one of them during the course of that time?
Yes, so it's during the course of the marriage, right? So property acquired during the course of the marriage is split evenly. So let's say Lacey has a business before we're married, and the business is worth nothing, right? But now the business is worth millions. Well, that millions of value was acquired during the marriage. So I'm entitled to a settlement on that. Now, in a non-community property state, they do what's called equitable distribution, which means, well, wait a minute, she had that before she made those millions. I would actually not be entitled. But other properties we could dispute. But it doesn't mean that I'm entitled to half her shit. It's just I'm entitled to what they think is a fair or equitable portion. So in these looking at this in these blue states, that's where you want to be getting divorced if you're the wealthier party. In the green states, if you're the less wealthier party, that's where you want to be getting divorced because you're going to be getting more.
So the green states are the community property states, yes, where they're just going to sort of 50-50 people,
right?
Almost no matter what, it seems.
Yep.
As opposed to those blue colored states, there are going to be states where
it's going
to be equitable distribution.
Right.
You owned this before, so the other person's not getting 50% of it, etc.
Right. So if Lacey's worth, $1 billion, right, and I'm worth, 100,000, in a community property state, they'd be like, well, we're going to try and make it as close to 50-50. So now Lacey's getting raped, right?
So let's pause and let's stop and clarify here. If we were not married, mm-hmm, but in a relationship for a certain number of years,
3 years or longer,
3 years or longer,
living together,
that matters in a community property state.
If they have common law as well, but they usually do.
If they have common law as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what about those blue-colored states?
No. We could be living together, not married, and it doesn't, and we could break up, and I'm not entitled to anything.
And they're going to say they don't care. They're going to say, "I'm sorry about your broken heart. Go get an apartment."
Yeah,
right?
you weren't married. You're not entitled to
Right.
anything. There's no contract.
Right.
Right. Remember, marriage is marriage is about love and all. No, it's a contract. It's mutual indemnification. That's all it is. It's two of us signing an agreement. Right. At the end of the day, because you can love somebody and live with somebody forever, and never be married to them.
Right.
Right. Marriage is about property. It's a property contract at the end of the day.
Right.
So these are just how kind of the different states look at them. And we'll come back to that in a second. But just to give you an example, part of the reason we're bringing this up today, and it's been an issue, is because recently there's been conservative push to get rid of what's called no-fault divorce. Okay? And that's what we're going to focus on, because no-fault divorce is important to understand. So, let me give you a real quick history lesson. Early in this country's beginning, it was mostly common law kind of stuff, but ideally with divorce back then, in most places, you could only get divorced if the husband wanted to get divorced. And even then, they might not let him get divorced unless he had a really good reason. So, if Lacey and I were married, Lacey could want to leave, and she doesn't have a choice. She's got to stay. She's basically property at that point, right?
Or at least legally, I have to stay. Whether I walk out the door or not, who knows? But legally, I would be stuck
But legally,
there.
I could drag you back and force you to stay. Back in those days, right? Now, then it came all along, and then for a while there, they moved to these different kind of concepts of mutual consent, which means both of us would have to agree to a divorce, which is really kind of stupid because what if one of us doesn't want to get divorced? What if one of us is abusive or wants to hurt the other person or cause problems? Then Lacey could leave, but she could never really get divorced, which means she can't get remarried, or so she's always going to be technically tied until I agree, right? Unless she can come up with a reason. So then they came up with this thing called fault divorce. And then fault divorce, the concept was this: Lacey's like, well, he's abusive or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the court would then make a decision. But those took years and thousands of dollars in attorney costs, right? So it was really difficult.
Well, and then there's having to prove the thing that the other person did, even if they really legitimately were doing whatever the thing is you were accusing them of. Proving it may or may not necessarily be super easy.
Right.
You know?
Well, because for all I know, my neighbors could be doing all kinds of criminal shit, but I'm not over there. So it's if they start accusing each other, it's their word against their word. I mean, it's a tough case to try. So those were really difficult. So then they came up with this thing called no-fault divorce. And basically on a no-fault divorce, like I know in Oregon, and I'm sure in New York and whatnot, you get the form for divorce, right? And then they ask you why you're filing for divorce. There's a box that says irreconcilable differences. You just check that little box. That's the only reason you need to grant the divorce. Then it's just a matter of getting it all finalized.
And really, that either person could do that and say, we have differences that just are not going to be able to be resolved. Sorry, I need out of this.
You don't even
right?
Maybe it's not even that you have differences. Maybe you're just bored. I mean, you could any reason.
That can be an irreconcilable difference.
Right.
Boredom.
Right. But that's the point is you don't have to have a reason. You could I just want to get divorced.
Now, as not nice as this may be, quite frankly, I don't know that a person needs a reason to not want to be in a relationship anymore. You can just simply not want to be in it.
Right.
And that's really rough for the other person to hear. But if you don't want to be in it, you don't want to be in it. If they don't want to be in it, they don't want to be in it. And that could be really horrible for you to hear, you know?
Yeah. But that's the thing. So that, that thing became, a big deal. And now it's a situation where every state in the United States allows no-fault divorce. Some states will allow for, let's see, what is it? Here we go. Let me do this. I'll show you the map again. So this is no fault added to traditional. So the blue states here are all no fault divorce only, right? The green states are no fault divorce, plus they have a fault divorce. So you can get traditional fault divorce at fault if you want to, which might be something you'd want to do if you want to get more money out of the other person. Because if you could show that they're at fault for the divorce, they're going to get more
This
in
person
alimony.
was abusive, or this person
More likely to
was-
get custody of the children, all that
Sure.
stuff. Yeah. Now, you're more likely to if there's an at-fault reason in a no-fault state to get custody and all that, but it's not going to affect alimony and stuff that much.
Sure.
It's just a no-fault, you're out, right? So going through all that, the Republicans, there's a big push now to try to get rid of the no-fault thing, and a lot of it is that they just don't want. A lot of it was no-fault was initially so women could get out of bad marriages. Now it's just, in general, it's just anybody who wants to get out of a marriage, right? But they want to get rid of it because they don't like the idea that women can just leave their husbands. So there's a push now. So like after Roe v. Wade, and they were talking about this, they wanted to get rid of Loving v. Texas, which allows interracial marriage. They want to get rid of that. So you can no longer marry somebody outside your race. Yeah. They want to get rid of gay marriage, which was 2015. Right? So that's less than 8 years old. They want to get rid of that. So no more same-sex marriage. And they want to get rid of no-fault divorce and go back to more of either a mutual or paternal system where it's impossible to get a divorce if you're in an abusive relationship. So that's what they're pushing for now. So once again, it goes back to the other thing with abortion, where it's like they really want women to be boxed in. To like, you get married and you're stuck. You know? If you get pregnant,
you're having the baby. If you get married, you're stuck with the person. And by the way, you can only marry a certain type of person.
Right. So here's this
The person
guy.
has to be of the opposite sex, and it has to be somebody of your race, and right?
So here's this guy, Steven Crowder. If you don't know who he is, he's a real scumbag. So he's a right-wing talk show host, super racist, super misogynistic, very much into the, women are chattel and property, right? And his wife is leaving him. And he gave a big speech about it. He kind of talked down no-fault divorce because he doesn't believe she should be able to leave him. But then this surfaced where he was actually being kind of verbally abusive to his wife, kind of. You'll watch, it is. But we're going to watch that real quick. And hang on. So we're going to watch him. So this is a clip. This is Francesca Fiorentini, and she's doing a little story on this.
Steven Crowder, who seems to be as toxic as he is publicly in private, with people like his wife, with people like his pregnant wife. Disturbing video was obtained by journalist Yashar Ali, and it reveals that the commentator Steven Crowder is berating his wife, and this apparently is one instance of what we later found out was many. In this one clip, it's from June of 2021, and his wife Hillary is 8 months pregnant. This is after a week where Steven Crowder announced that he and his wife were getting a divorce, and weirdly asking why that was legal in Texas and why you could just do that. So anyway, we'll put that aside. But then we all got hit with this little slice, so take a look.
I drew a boundary. No, you just did it. I drew a boundary of abusive and cruel. You were not taking the car. No. Because if you refuse to do wifely things, then I will go pick up the groceries. There's no groceries. I have steaks. What pellets? My grill. I know it's not a reasonable request, but I'll go do it. How about you first? Hillary, how do you respect me? Yes. Other than that, you'll see the love comes back. No. Other than that, no, you're not taking the car. You're not taking the car. You are not.
Then I will ask them to pick me up. Would you like me to ask?
for that, right? So expect Steven. Get an Uber.
Okay, Steven, I can't.
You want to walk out right now? Listen to me. I can't go to the gym. I can't go to my parents. I can't call my friends. I can't be home. You're going to take the car and leave me here. Hillary, just think of how boxing you've made me.
What do you need me to pick up? I'll get it. I'll be back when I'm back.
No, that doesn't work either. You'll be back when you're back. That doesn't work either.
So there it is. Man of your dreams.
Wow.
And then later he threatened to fuck her up. So he threatened physical violence against her later in that, which he admitted to.
I mean, that sounds like so many types of abuse rolled into one, and
It's verbal
I
abuse.
feel like verbal abuse for sure, but I feel like I was also kind of hearing what sounded like financial abuse too. It seems like it was alluded to that I'm assuming she didn't have maybe her own money or somehow didn't have the ability to get an Uber like that.
She's a housewife.
Was I misunderstanding?
Well, she's a housewife, so he makes all the money. So the whole story went down like this. So apparently he went and talked to a divorce lawyer, and then he told his assistant to cut her off financially. This is while she's pregnant, about to have birth. Then she found out about that, and so she filed for divorce. She went and got a lawyer and filed right away. What was it? While all this is going on, he went and had like chest implants to make himself look more muscular, kind of thing. And because of that, he missed the birth of his twins because he wanted to go with elective surgery. And then he moved out. And so now I'm going to tell you this right now. If you're getting separated, divorced or whatever, and you move out and leave the kids with the other person, they're going to get them in the custody arrangement. You're basically forgoing that because you walked out on them. So just so you're aware that if you're a parent, that's just how that goes. But we can look at this real quick because he lives in Texas. So let's look at Texas. What is Steven looking at here? Well, let's go to alimony, right? So custodial status considered. Yep. So she's probably going to get the kids. So she's definitely going to get alimony. And because he's the one that, let's do this. So what did I do? Hang on. Marital fault is considered in Texas, so she's going to sue him as an at-fault divorce, right? So she can get more money out of that. And her standard of living, look at the house she was living in, they're going to consider that, so she's going to get to live pretty much close to her standard of living. And because we talked about that before, Texas is a community property state, she's going to be entitled to almost half the assets. So he's going to get raked in this divorce. Plus, she's probably going to get primary custody of the kids, if not full custody, depending on those videos, because if they determine him to be verbally abusive, they're going to want him to well, you can see the kids, but you got to see him with a social worker for the first year before we let you.
Right. They might want to put some parameters on that because while they didn't see him doing physical things, they definitely heard enough verbal abuse to where I'm sure they're going to be like, can these kids really be with him alone? And for how long? That could become really a question.
Yeah. So that's the big thing. But that was like his whole thing. Like she Francesca pointed out, his whole deal was, I don't know why she's even allowed to get divorced in Texas. Well, that's because they don't want no fault, because she can just no fault and walk away. In this case, she can do an at fault. She still doesn't have to have a reason to get divorced, but the at fault, she can then blame him for more and say, I want more money and alimony and whatnot for compensatory damages. Right. Being in that relationship. So there's all that going on. So just to give you a sense of kind of why you have to factor all these things in. So like if Steven Crowder was my client, which wouldn't happen, I'd tell him to fuck out of my office, right? I wouldn't want to work for that guy, but let's say hypothetically was, that's what I'd be talking to him about. I'd be sitting there going, well, Steven, you're in a community property state. Half the assets are probably going to go to her. And since she married you before you were rich and famous, a lot of that was acquired during the marriage. So you're going to have to look at that issue. Plus, she's probably going to get most of the custody of the kids. So you're going to be paying child support based on your income, and you're going to be paying alimony based on your income. So you're looking at about your net worth falling by about half at least. Plus, you're going to be paying out even more every month. So your income coming in now is going to be even reduced quite a bit. So now we have to talk about how you're going to function going forward. Now, he makes millions, so it's not going to really affect him in that heightened sense, but it's going to be a lot of money.
Right. Well, since he has so much money, you know, I'm sure his lifestyle situation will be fine.
Right.
You know, I'm not even trying to be funny when I say that. It just,
yeah, he'll be okay.
You know, if he were in a lower income bracket than what he is, but still like the higher earner, it actually really could be something that would impact somebody in a way that feels pretty shocking. But I mean, for him, he'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. You know, but that's kind of what it is. So from the financial perspective, that's what we're looking at from a no fault at fault divorce. But a no fault is you can get anywhere in the country. Now, though, if we were to rescind that, then now all of a sudden divorce becomes incredibly expensive. So if you're the lower income party, how are you going to afford it? You know? But here is the Tim Pool show. Tim Pool is also kind of a right wing. He says he's moderate, but he's not. He's a right wing nut job. And this is what is this? No fault divorce has destroyed men's confidence in marriage. Men don't want to get married anymore because their wives could leave them whenever they want, I guess. That's the whole point of this discussion.
Wait, is that really, do we really think that's the reason why?
No.
I'm feeling like, I don't know, my theory is that people are not getting married as much because there's less of a sort of religious sort of push toward it. I mean, a lot more people are not identifying strongly with a particular, you know, religious or morality reason. They feel the need to, so they're just going, do I care about this? I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of things. The other thing to remember too is getting married is expensive in most cases. And the other thing is, I mean, there's benefits, tax benefits and stuff depending on your situation if you're getting married. But the thing about it is a lot of people, it's like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. I just want to, you know, we can just live together, date, whatever. I mean, it's just a different attitude. Now, I mean, it could be some of it's religious, some of it's cultural, a lot of it's financial, I would say too. If you don't feel like you're in a financial position to get married and have kids, right? Because there's also once you get married to somebody, things change. Like once you get engaged to somebody, the relationship changes, the dynamic changes, right? And things are more serious. So you have to, you know, I just think it's just people are just different. Just less people just want to get married. Could be a lot of reasons. I'm not a sociologist. I don't know all the ins and outs, but you know.
Well, I just know that once upon a time, you know, further back in history, there was all of this push, you know, based very much around religion, that was really the way that you had to do it. And
yeah,
people don't identify so much as being so strictly subscribed to these various religions anymore. Even people who identify as being a part of a particular religion maybe are less strict feeling about rules.
Yeah, plus there was in the 50s and the 60s, and there was the idea of the nuclear family, right? Mom, dad, the kids. And that was everybody was, you get a job, get married, have kids. Get a house, get a car. Right. That's all kind of changed a little bit too. So I think there's some cultural shift, but religion could be part of it. But let's listen to them because they think it's the no fault divorce thing, which I think is ridiculous because first off, let's say you were talking to some guy who was 25 and was like, well, I don't want to get married because of no fault divorce. It's like, how do you even know what that fucking is? Most people don't know what the difference is. I know because I used to do divorce law with my father. I used to help him with those cases, right? I know what that is. But how many people before we started this video knew what no fault and at fault divorce were? How many people?
Actually did.
Well, unless you know somebody who's been divorced, You know,
Right.
people of our age have probably heard of it, but if you're in your 20s, you don't. That's not preventing you from getting married, right? Because nobody who's really keen on getting married is thinking, what if she divorces me 10 years from now?
That's true. If I were really excited about getting married, somebody is saying, but you might get divorced or this, that, and the other.
I don't know.
To things divorce related wouldn't be the thing that would make me not do it.
Yeah, at that point you're like, okay, yeah, maybe we'll get divorced, but no, we're in love.
It would have to be a more substantial problem that was really based in the now, as opposed to 10 years from now there might be this problem. I'd be like, well, 10 years from now I might be hit by a bus. What else is your point?
Yeah, 10 years from now, a comet might hit the Earth. We don't know. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. The geniuses at the Tim Pool Show.
It's no fault divorce then, right? Like, so I can understand kind of like what you both are saying, like, and I as well, like, I don't have a
Hang on, let's see if that
prenup. I wouldn't want to be, enter into marriage that way. But I can also understand where, for a man or a woman that had built up a lot of wealth, and we're now getting into this, legal contract that's, supposed to represent a spiritual commitment, but then we're making it a legal contract. And part of that legal...
Well, see, now you actually hit something there on the head, because she said spiritual commitment. That's not how everybody views it. Plus, the interesting thing she said is if you're a man with money, well, what if you're a woman with a lot of money, and you're marrying a man that doesn't have a lot of money? You're in the same boat. Doesn't matter that you don't have a penis, right? You're in the same boat. And yeah, it's a legal issue. And yeah, but at that point, it's like, if I'm really wealthy and I'm going to marry somebody who's not, right? We're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to tell them, yeah, there's going to be a prenup. And if that's a deal breaker, that's a deal breaker. But I have to protect myself legally, right? In that situation. I mean, and if you want to do it without a prenup, that's your thing. But I don't think a lot of rich guys are going around going, well, I really want to get married, but my money, and I don't want to make her sign a prenup, so I guess the relationship's over. No, they're going to say this is what it's going to be. I don't think there are a lot of rich guys that have that problem, or rich women that have that problem, that they can't get a fucking attorney.
Right.
So this is kind of a nonsense thing. And then the spiritual aspect, it's like, okay, ideally marriage is about love, but initially a marriage was not about love, it was about property. Because you can be in love with somebody and live with them and not be married. That's what they're overlooking.
Legal contract isn't structured around a lifelong agreement like it used to be, because we got rid of because now we have no fault divorce. So I can understand getting rid of no fault divorce.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, and I think also,
the courts are heavily biased in favor of women.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. That used to be true for custody back in the 70s and the 80s, but that changed quite a bit in the 90s. So now they look at what is best for the child. So fathers who do want custody win about half the time. Now, typically, women get custody, but that's because in a lot of cases, fathers don't want full custody. So they don't really fight for full custody. And the interesting thing about that, and I wish I had pulled up the study. I'll try and find the study and I'll add it to a link to this. But the group of men that least fight for custody are white men in the South. You know what the group that fights for custody the most? Black men. And they're the ones saying, well, all these black guys aren't fathers and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, no, a lot of these black guys are fathers and they're there for their kids. They're just not married because it's too expensive or they don't want to get married. But they have custody of their kids, or partial custody. I thought that was interesting. I didn't, because you hear them say that all the time about black people being shitty parents. And it's like, nope, it's mostly white people. I was kind of shocked.
Now, one thing that's curious about the statistic about men not necessarily fighting for full custody, it makes me wonder, and I don't know that there's any way for us to know this, but it makes me wonder how much of that has to do with some of the psychology of what happened in the 70s and 80s, so much with it just automatically being something that women would be granted unless somehow they were shown unfit.
Well, I know. I think
it kind of makes me wonder if there's something of the psychology of that makes men go, well, maybe I'll go for joint custody because they just don't necessarily think that they would get full custody.
No, I don't think it was just the 70s and the 80s. I think that's just sort of historical, but especially European values. And in fact, in a lot of countries where it was women give birth, women raise the children. That was the expectation. And it's just been sort of a cultural expectation that's permeated. I don't think it's anything that happened specifically in the 70s and the 80s. I think it's just in general that's the expectation. And so there are a lot of guys who are like, I don't want to raise the kids. I'm a man, I want to go work and do these things, or I'm an alpha. Guys like these who were, I'm the male, I shouldn't have to do this shit. Guys like Steven Crowder, do your wifely duties, go get my groceries. Right.
People who
have sexual expectations based on gender.
Right, who are really married to these sort of traditional gender roles.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to, nowadays, a lot of times fathers do get custody. Because sometimes the mothers just they're checked out or they don't want it. Right? Or the father makes more money or is in a better position to take care of the kid. But that's been the trend to more towards it's more equal since the 80s. But that's, so this idea that women get advantages in divorce court, that was the only real advantage they got. Now, the reason he can say, well, women get more advantages if they get more financially is because traditionally women have been the housewife or made less money in those more traditional relationships. That's not so much true anymore because more women graduate from college and women are starting to make more money than men over the last 20 years, just in general, which might be part of why these guys have a hard time getting married because it's like all the eligible women make more money than you. And it's emasculating and you don't want to, and it's a deal breaker. That could be an issue. But they don't want to look at it like that, right? They're going back to, they want it to be traditional. But the bottom line is that's not how it is anymore. And so if you're in a relationship and the woman makes more money, like I said, you're the breadwinner, you make more money, but I have more free time and we get divorced, well, I probably get the kids because I can spend more time with the kids. And you'd probably agree to it because I've already spent more time with the kids. And you can provide more that way. You see? So this idea that it's, once again, the way it's split is it's not leaning towards women, it's leaning towards who the less wealthier party in the marriage was. Which traditionally has been women, but now it's balancing out a little bit more. So that's a whole bullshit thing because they're trying to make it into this, though it's a sexual or a sex thing, or women get all the advantages, or it's unfair to men. When it's like, no, it's just that the bar has shifted, right? It was unfair when you guys had all the advantages and whatnot, but now that it's sort of flipping back the other way, now it's becoming more fair, and now you're still bitching about it like you were getting the shaft. So that's all that was.
Same degree, especially with children, man.
Well, it's funny because we live in this culture where no-fault divorce is the law of the land, and people will say things like, well, look how often marriage ends in divorce. How could you ever be in favor of social structures which disincentivize that or would dissuade people from getting divorced? But I think what people often miss is if young folks know they're in an environment where divorce is not an option, I firmly believe they're going to be more careful about who they choose to marry. And I think also people are going to be more careful about their decision-making in general when it comes to sexuality. A lot of people will start sleeping with someone, and as you've mentioned, that releases oxytocin and other hormones that bond you. And there are a lot of couples that end up together because they're sexually engaging with one another and they're bonding, but they're not actually really good for each other. And then at some point...
Okay, so... I'm not sure where he's entirely going with that, but this idea that you're going to get you're going to be more careful about who you marry if you know divorce isn't an option. Well, no, I would think that you wouldn't get married at all. Because if divorce isn't an option, why the fuck would you take that risk?
Yeah, honestly, I'm going to be honest. I'm somebody who has always been reluctant about the idea of marriage, and I have not ever been married.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always been sort of reluctant. And if I knew I could literally never opt out, there would be no chance at all anybody would get me down an aisle.
No.
You know?
No, that's my point.
I'd be like, what, are you kidding? I can never get out. I literally would have to be in this until I was dead. I mean, my intention, if I should ever get married, would be to stay in that marriage. That would be very much my intention.
Well, the intention, yeah. But my whole thing is like, look, if you're like, because I've been engaged. It didn't work out, but I've been engaged. And it was like, my whole thought was, look, if it doesn't work out, I can always get divorced. Right? That's the only reason I would even go that far, is because there's an out at the end.
I mean, think about it. What if the first job you ever took was the one that you had to be in until you died? What would you be doing for a living?
Nothing. I'd be working for myself doing something.
The first job I ever took was actually at a summer camp. It was a lot of fun, but work at a summer camp until I died? Okay, so why is it, that sounds super absurd, but like, why would you want the first anything you ever did to be something you had to do until you died? The first job you ever have might be the perfect one. The first marriage you ever have might be the perfect one. I hope everybody has that life.
Sure.
The first house you buy is the perfect one.
Right. My whole thing is, I like, as a finance person, that there's an out. I like to be able to correct a mistake. Because you don't know going in. And, I mean, they might be sweet and nice and all that, but then once you're married, it's a nightmare. You don't know. I like to have the options. And that's the key thing here, kids, is with divorce and all this stuff that we're talking about, it's what are the different options? And we're trying to look at what the best solutions are. But the idea is you need to maximize your options if you want to be successful and happy in life. And the way you do that is not closing yourself off.
I would argue that knowing that you don't have to stay in a marriage has the ability to potentially make it better, because you know that you're there by choice.
And not by force.
You know that if there are issues that you are choosing to try to work out together, that you are doing that by choice.
Right.
That's, to me, that seems to have the possibility of making the relationship stronger, not
weaker.
Right. Exactly. Because quite frankly, if you have no choice but to stay in a thing or whatnot, like, you're going to work on the issues? I don't know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I can't get out anyway. Meh.
Yeah. Well, let's watch a little bit more of this real quick, and then
point in the marriage when the novelty of that person wears off, they get divorced. So I think it's not just that we have no fault divorce in people who would otherwise be.
Let's just skip ahead a little bit.
We were talking about this the other day, that we're citing Jordan Peterson so often in this. Yes. He was saying something that after 35, you better have a family, because that's when things start to break down. That's what the conversation.
Oh, boo. Okay, I'm done with it. This is the point.
Yeah, this is icky. I don't want to watch this anymore.
So the after 35 thing, that was the Jordan Peterson. That was for women, because women, once you're 35, you're never going to find a man because you're past your prime. That was that whole spiel. So it's sexist shit at that point. So anyway, so that was kind of our whole spiel with the divorce stuff. I'll put some links down for kind of the financial planning process. But yeah, when you're getting divorced, you should really, definitely get a lawyer, and definitely you should talk to a financial planner. And there are some who specialize in divorce, but any decent financial planner will do fine. Because you're going to have to deal with things like splitting up retirement savings, the house, properties, whatever's there. So it's, it's a process. Plus, you're going to have to factor in how you're going to live and pay alimony and child support if you're on that side of it.
Right.
Right. So those are all things to factor in. Anyway, so to wrap it up here, we're going to do, hang on one sec. All right. So here's the Dave Ramsey crew, and they're going to be. So Biden has an initiative to try and help people buy houses, especially lower income people. And what it does is it basically reduces the fees. When you buy a house, there are a lot of fees, right? So it reduces the fees for people with lower credit scores, FICO scores. Okay, when you're buying a house, and it depends on your credit score and the cost of the home. But to cover that, people that have really high credit scores and are buying more expensive homes, their fees went up a little bit. And the Dave Ramsey crew is really upset about this. So we're gonna watch them try to explain it, and then we're gonna go over it. But here it is, them trying to explain it real quick.
All right, Jade, about 1,000 people have sent me this on social media, and we've got to cover it on today's show because it's big news, and not in a good way. Let me read you the first line from this Fox News article. A Biden administration rule is set to take effect that will force good credit home buyers to pay more for their mortgages to subsidize loans to higher risk borrowers. This is wild.
Yeah.
So let's break this down. That was a lot of words.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's what's happening. People that have been quote unquote responsible, we don't love credit scores here, but people who have good credit scores, who are putting 15 to 20% down,
doing the right thing,
are now being dinged and having to pay more for their mortgages in order to help those who have bad credit scores and nothing down.
No!
Okay. So, a little deceiving. They're not paying more.
I was going to say, I also love the fact that they're saying who are putting 15 to 20% down. I'm pretty sure that they're just throwing that in there. I don't think the legislation.
No. That is. No, that is on the legislation because people that can afford to do that have more money, right?
Oh, so that really is in there. I thought they were just making it in.
No. That's in there, but what they miss is that's also telling you who has more money. Right? Because if I could afford to throw down 30% of my house, I clearly have more money than you do, right? So here it is. It's not your mortgage that goes up. It's the fees to purchase. Okay? So the fees on the down payment, right, based on credit score and down payment have been updated. So here's the article from USA Today. All right. So if you have a top credit score, you'll still pay less than if you have a low credit score. So they're not paying more than people with low credit scores. They're still paying a lot less if you have a high credit score. But your fees are going up a little bit. But so the penalty for having a low credit score will be smaller than it was before May 1st. So here's the deal. If you have a low credit score now and you're getting a home with a mortgage, your fees for all that, for the mortgage and all the down payment stuff, are really high. You're getting dinged because you have a low credit score. So you're paying even more. So it costs you even more to get a house. So it's harder to get a house if you have a low credit score, which is mostly people who are younger. Right? The idea behind this is to get more younger people buying houses, people in their 20s and 30s. Because fewer of us own property than our parents that are millennials and Gen Z. So the idea is to try and encourage them. So their fees are going to go down now. Now, people that have really high credit scores already have low fees, and their fees are still going to be a lot lower. But they're going to go up a little bit to offset the bottom, right? So we can give those people a break. So it's not as difficult to buy a house. So what does that mean? Let's see. I think they give a great example here. So, for example, if you have a credit score of 659, this is a good credit score, and you're borrowing 75% of the home's value, so you put down 25%, right, on the house, you'll pay a fee equal to 1.5% of the loan balance. Okay? Before these changes, you would have paid 2.75%. So you paid 1.25% more. So on a $300,000 loan, that's $3,750 in closing costs. Okay? So what's the difference here is you just saved this person $3,750. Sorry. That's all they saved. This is not hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is $3,700 on a purchase in a fee. That's all it is. They're making it sound like it's the mortgage for the rest of your life and you're paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for this. No. This is a $3,700 closing cost fee. Now, what does it look like if you're on the wealthier side and you're already getting a break, right? On the other end, let's say you have a credit score of 740 or higher, so really high, and you would have paid a 0.25% fee instead of 2.75. You pay 0.25, so you're paying nothing anyway on a loan for 75%. So same kind of loan. After that, after May 1st, now your loan could go up to 0.375, so it goes up 0.175%. So on that same house, right, $300,000, you're talking about a $350 or $375 increase, roughly, for the person with the high credit score and more money.
I don't love that the fee is higher, but it's not.
It's nothing
swing,
though,
and it's not a continuous, swing either.
No, yeah. It's a one-time thing, and it's only going to cost you a few hundred more dollars per 100,000 on the closing costs. But it's going to save younger people who need to build credit and want to get property. Is going to save them a couple thousand on the other side.
I do love that those fees got less for other people, though, because I don't like that it feels as though they were taken advantage of. I mean, I realize
they were, though. That was the problem.
Things are more expensive when you have lesser credit at each increment. Like, I just get that that's baked into the cake, so to speak, but making that a little bit better is I think nice.
Yeah, no, but the argument to that is that when you're rich, you get a lot of these breaks. And it's easier to have good credit score and be rich and stay rich and blah, blah, blah. But when you're poor, it's hard to get out of that because everything is more expensive.
Right.
So now they just, okay, we're going to lower the fees some, but that means in order to make it equitable for the mortgage companies and all that stuff, for the closing costs, then we're going to have to raise some fees on the other end. But who are they raising it on? They're raising it on the few top percent of people who make a lot of money too. And it's based on the total amount you're borrowing. It's not based on... So once again, so now the rich guy's got to pay an extra couple $100 to save the poor guy thousands. And they're bitching about how unfair this is. When for years, the poor guy's been paying thousands to save the rich guy a couple $100.
Right.
So the whole thing is just backwards, but we'll watch a bitch about it some more because this is so stupid. But once again, they have to blame the poor person. It's always the poor person's fault.
Oh,
That's the summary.
no!
And this is not spin. Like, we can go political all day because it is political, but from a financial perspective, this is insane.
Purely,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
my no is purely financial, by the way.
So here's the details. Experts believe that borrowers with a credit score of about 680 would pay around $40 more per month on a $400,000 mortgage.
That's not true.
Under rules from the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
It's not true.
Which goes into effect May 1st. And by the way, if you're thinking, I'm going to sneak under the... No, it's too late. You would have had to close 2 days ago to not get hit by this. It's already happening. It's just now official.
$40 more per month. So if you...
For the way they broke that down, That $40 a month, that's for 1 year to cover the fee.
Oh, it's how they broke the fee down to say this is the equivalent of $40 per month for the next year.
But they're trying to make it sound like that's on your mortgage for the next 30 years.
Right.
But it's all financial, and they understand the financial. Fucking idiots, man. I swear to God, I don't know. I guess if we put enough chimps in a room, they'll pump out Shakespeare, but... Jesus, these two.
You have and we don't preach 30-year mortgages.
That's 15 grand.
15 grand on top of your normal interest that you're paying.
No, it's not, though, because it's only calculated over the year.
Over the course of your amortization schedule.
Oh, my God.
Unbelievable.
So the Federal Housing Finance Agency, they oversee the federally backed home mortgage companies like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. You've heard about them. And they're trying to give consumers more affordable housing options. Which, let me remind you, the housing market's been struggling in the way of...
Wait, I want to go back. Look at her response. We're going to give consumers more affordable housing options. Look at her response. This is how much they hate middle class and poor people. Look at her response.
Which, let me remind you, the housing market's been struggling in the way...
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Fucking poor people. Wanting fucking houses and food. Jeez. I think we can end on that. That was what else could we say? I mean, that's
no. I feel like that's a perfectly good note to end on.
Oh my God! So the Dave Ramsey geniuses hard at work in their think tank. Maybe we can send them a gift basket of bananas or an edible arrangement or something.
Right. Yeah, it just makes me wonder if they knew or maybe didn't read all of something to not know that was a 1 year thing instead of a 30-year thing. I don't know. It always surprises me because the amount of people they have on their staff that can research things.
Yeah, well, we just looked at the USA Today article where they covered this whole thing. That's all it was. It was just the fees on the closing costs.
Yeah.
It's not the mortgage. It doesn't alter the mortgage rates. That's a completely different calculation. Right? So, I mean, once again, like you said, I think they read whatever the Wall Street Journal bit on it, and they read 2 paragraphs, and that was it. I mean, and they just ignore what they don't want to see. I mean, like we saw Jade did that one, and the first sentence of the article that she was citing disproved her whole argument. And we were sitting there laughing because, like, she couldn't even read the first fucking sentence. She just read the headline.
Right.
So, yep, they're all at it. But anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Where can everybody catch you, Lace?
All right. So for any of my articles or information about upcoming coaching programs or workshops, you can visit me at mysensewithsense.com. If you have questions about any of those things, or if you have topic requests for us, links you want to send us, etc., you can feel free to email us. Duncan, where can they email us?
Yeah, email us at gossipfinancead@outlook.com. It's at the bottom. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will catch you next time and have some fun. Talk to you later.